So Sauvignon turned up as a as a potential product about 1985.
I was going to
I
ask you
started
when
getting
you first planted it and how you caught that wave as a company.
Yeah, well, it started getting some attention, but it wasn't the only attention. We were getting attention for other products,
Yes.
like a good write-up, you win an international award on a product, which could be ironically something like Muller Turgau,
Yeah.
which we were growing a lot of, and produced a reasonably respectable wine. I think it's quite popular in parts of Europe today, and around Austria and Slovakia, you see quite a bit of Muller Turgau growing there, and anyway, we were sort of picking up these awards, and then Sauvignon's getting a bit of press internationally, but there was hardly any of it. And so Joe, my uncle, was starting to investigate, what's Sauvignon about? And it's grown in Marlborough. We didn't have any holdings in Marlborough or any relationships. So at the end of the 80s, sort of 4 years later, we're looking for Sauvignon down there because we're getting demand for it from our international distributors. So the first thing we get is we buy some Sauvignon juice. It's not even grapes. We can't get grapes, but we buy some juice off someone, off another winery, and we ferment it and make this wine. And we're fairly impressed with what we've turned out. We easily sell that to our existing international distributor partners, and then a dad goes down to Marlborough and starts door knocking on farmers' doors. Can I buy some Sauvignon off you? And he finds someone, one of the first people he had agreed to grow grapes for us, who still grows grapes for us.
Fantastic.
Um, like in 1990, get some grapes off this farming family who are seventh or eighth generation farmers down there, and then starts growing that. And so through the 90s, we were definitely into Sauvignon. It was increasingly what our distributors internationally wanted to buy off us, and we could see this change. But I think Dan Carlin said in one of his podcasts that, the thing about history, looking back on it, is how it worked out. So it's always this sort of, we know all the stuff and you go, why did someone do that? That was stupid. Shouldn't have done that. I can tell you during the 90s, we weren't sure if the music was going to stop on Sauvignon. We had all this demand, but you'd seen
Indeed.
products go onto the market. It could be, anything, just hits a spike, everyone wants it, and next year the fax machine is quiet,
I hear you.
and it's just run its course. And we were looking at Sauvignon going, we don't have any history to understand how this is going to, is this got legs or is it a fad? And we could look at Australia and see that they were doing well with Shiraz, and they were on a continued growth pattern with Shiraz. And unfortunately for Australia, that has substitutability as, a very attractive, a well-made, well-structured, fruit-driven red wine. But you can substitute that for anything that Italy does, Spain does, South America does. But that hadn't happened yet, where they'd sort of tailed off on their growth trajectory. And so we were looking at that going, well, Australia's done this, and that's really the only thing we can see. So we'll just keep growing this, but growing it kind of conservatively. Then we had some frosts at the end of the 1990s into the early 2000s. So we realized we really had to double down here and start buying more and more vineyards. So we just got on a vineyard buying spree over the years, and we now have 14 vineyards. We're fairly self-sufficient on Sauvignon. We control the supply chain with the grape growing through to, we have two wineries, one in Marlborough, one in Auckland. We do our own packaging, so bottling and labeling and warehousing, we do it ourselves, which is unusual these days. People outsource that function. And we have very long-term, high-quality distributor relationships to get our wine out to retail and on-trade stores.
Fantastic. I'd be curious as to the percentage of your production that is Sauvignon Blanc in 2024.
That number moves around by a few percentage points, but it's north of 90%.
Really, really, because we
So, well, actually, sorry, I'm thinking about exports. Export numbers would be sort of 92% Sauvignon, but actually in production terms, because we sell domestically as well, we would probably be around 85 to 87% Sauvignon. So we are very Sauvignon focused. It's a
so
big jump down to our next biggest variety, which is Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir. That's from
Probably at
Marlborough you
the
make that, right?
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And then you also make a Pinot Gris style Pinot Grigio, which we're going to be tasting later today. But
Those are,
you still make wines from Hawke's Bay, right?
yes.
Fantastic.
So Hawke's Bay is dominant. Hawke's Bay is warmer,
Yeah.
has a profile that is a bit different to Marlborough in that it warms up quicker in the morning and the heat will last longer through the day. So if Marlborough has a growing profile that's quite high and then drops off, its temperature really happens between sort of 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Hawke's Bay will be warmer earlier and warmer later. So it's much more suited to growing Chardonnay, our Bordeaux Reds, and Syrah. So that's really what we focus on out of Hawke's Bay. We do also grow Sauvignon at Hawke's Bay. We find it is more tropical. We've got to pick it earlier to really get the most out of it. Whereas often in Marlborough, we're picking it quite later in the ripening profile.
So would it be true to say you were the kind of, well, no, I was going to say inverse prodigal son, but you did your study in wine in the late 80s at Roseworthy. You came into the family company, you shook things up a bit, and then you went off into the pharma business.
Yeah, yeah. I I did that as you said. I studied viticulture and winemaking at Roseworthy. I had a degree in winemaking and viticulture, and then came back into the cellar floor, just dragging hoses around and working with my uncle and the rest of the team there. And then I thought, well, actually, I could be the winemaker, but I'm kind of interested in the business side, and I know nothing about business. So I went off to Auckland University and did a commerce degree for majoring in marketing and management.
I missed that.
And yeah, so then with that, I decided that I could either just work with my father and uncle, but really learn what they know, which isn't going to move the game forward, or I could go out into a different industry. So I wanted something which was science-based and consumer facing. And so I went into pharma, got a job with Glaxo, which turned into Glaxo Wellcome, which turned into GlaxoSmithKline during the great merger period of pharma, and that was great. I did 7 years there in the sales and marketing department, and being a product manager, being a sales manager, being a business development manager, and ended up running the pharmacy division. And it was fantastic, great group of people, fantastic R&D business, and really good products that were first and foremost, they were brand led. And in the wine industry, you're either going to be a commoditized, lowest cost producer and supplier, and be very price inelastic, or you're brand driven and you've got some price elasticity, you've got some following for what you produce, and people understand why you do what you do as a brand.
So you went through that time, that period of your life, and then you brought your business smarts back to the family winery.
I came back in 2001, and I joined my father, Peter, and Joe, my uncle. Uh, Both of them had moved. Well, Dad was always on the business side. Joe had moved out of winemaking into the office, um, and and they were sort of needing someone to come in and start leaning on the wheel, and so the timing was good. People talk about succession and the difficulties of succession. And there was no difficulty with Dad and Joe. They were just figuring out, what do I know something about? And if I know something about it, you do that then. And so I was sort of in this general manager role, but three of us were collectively running it. And they were just handing stuff over to me as sort of years ticked by. And then one day I went and asked them about something. What do you think we should do about this? Some situation I can't remember. And they said, what do you think we should do about it? And I told them what I thought, how we should proceed. And they said, we'll do that then. And I left it's in my uncle's office. Dad, Joe, and I were in there. And I left to my office next door. And on the very short walk back to my office, I realised I was running the business,
Right.
and there'd never been a handover. It was so passive, and I realised that taps were getting turned off, and a tap was getting turned on, and
It all happened
and
very
that was good.
It all happened very organically, it sounds.
It was super organic, and there was never a conflict. And if I wanted to do something, they were supportive, and it was great. And it's the way succession should really occur. But what they did determine is they had confidence in what I was doing, so it was sort of easy. I wasn't shooting off on all sorts of oblique angles. I was doing it the way they felt it should be done, and the way I felt it should be done, consistent with our values of our business. And we run a fairly conservative shop, so I'm of that nature as well. But we had to do things better. So I added. It sounds pretty boring, but I added a lot of good process into how we did things. Just the really basic stuff to run businesses better, better, more consistent processes around all sorts of things.
Now, we mentioned organic there in a different context, but you have been committed to sustainability in quite a serious manner for quite some time. Could you tell me a little bit about that, and how much is organically farmed, and why is that?
Yeah, I think in the very early days, I think the first 50 years of our business was non-certified organic anyway. This is before the advent of the chemicals industry for farming. And so my grandfather would have been growing things in a very sustainable way. You're taking it off the land, you're adding back to the land. It's pretty organic. And then a number of applications came along for weed treatment, like herbicides and foliage disease treatment, and it made life a lot easier as you got on top of things like botrytis and powdery mildew, and hard to control weeds. And so that advent occurred sort of in the 60s through 70s, 80s. And we were always interested, we've always been into the sustainability of farming. And when you're a 100-year-old business, you have to be invested in this, because you're not in it for a short time where you can run things down and then walk away. You have to hand it on in good condition. So we've always had this value around sustainability, and that you must be not running this product, the land in particular, down, or the grapevines. And so we were pursuing sort of uncertified sustainability practices anyway, of how do we minimize what we do here and ensure that it's as little as possible to do the job. But and we actually were in putting ourselves up for trials to establish sustainability platforms that are certified in New Zealand, and we have the first certified vineyard. Our Iron Gap vineyard is number one certification number in New Zealand. So we were sort of at the forefront of that sort of thing, which was a precursor to organics in New Zealand. So we bought this horse farm. Well, it's a lady's horse. She's just had 4 or 5 horses, so we call it a horse farm. But
Hobby
she
farm.
had hobby farm with 4 horses that she liked to ride, and so Bronwyn had this farm, and we bought it off her in 2006 in Marlborough. It was a nice series of paddocks, about 32 hectares. And we bought Bronwyn's farm. She wanted to retire out of the horses and move to Christchurch, and so we it was Joe who drove this. My uncle said, let's plant this organics. We've talked about organics, having organic products, but the only way we're going to know more about organics is to grow these grapes organically. So we planted it and ran it from day one organic, and produced our first Marlborough Organic Sauvignon in 2009. And one of my favorite products is this Sauvignon Blanc. It's not your typical Marlborough spectrum or Sauvignon spectrum of green grass at one end and tropical passion fruit at the other. It's not on that spectrum. It's off on this mineral citrus spectrum, which is a terroir statement. I don't think that's too much to do with organics. It's just really stony soil, and it picks up these particular characteristics, but strongly mineral, which is great. You know, you think of mineral in Riesling more in that petrol mineral kerosene zone, but you get that flinty mineral. And it has these strong flinty mineral notes, which you can sort of take back to the stones that it is growing amongst, and but also quite strong citrus. As the vines have matured, that citrus has come out more and more, sort of lemon lime zone. Um, but anyway, we were on a learning curve with that, and I think the vineyard has always been successful. It hasn't had the disease incidence that we really expected. But we also kind of didn't expect it to crop at about 2/3 of a normal vineyard. So I think that has been the biggest learning and the biggest challenge of organics. I think people think organics is more expensive for a range of reasons around production, or maybe the cost of running the vineyard. And the cost does tend to be a bit higher because you're cultivating a lot more. But the real cost is the loss of crop that you don't get. So you take your cost of running a hectare and divide it into the number of tons of grapes you get off the hectare. If you get 2/3, and the cost per litre is a lot higher. So that's the main cost driver for us on organics is the bit of crop that's missing. It does suit a premium product. It's very concentrated. And in a product that I feel has a very strong terroir expression. So we've enjoyed organics. We do Sauvignon, we do Pinot Gris, we do an Albarino, we do Pinot Noir, we do a Chardonnay, all off the same vineyard. And they're all wonderful products. We do it in quite, the Sauvignon's quite big, but the other products are quite small, so fairly boutique.
David Babich, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. Really appreciate your time, your insight into the history of your quite remarkable family history with wine, and some insights into New Zealand winemaking as a whole. Hopefully we'll have a chance to have a glass of wine with you in person at some point in the not too distant future, whether it be in Auckland or over here in Ontario.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice, Jamie. It's never there's never a better thing than tasting a wine at the winery, and if you can jump up the supply chain and taste it out of the barrel, that's even better.
I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do. Thank you very much. Yeah.